Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Revelation, the 20th chapter. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And a key is here representing control, right, or power or authority. In fact, when we look into the word key, it says here, key, right, since the keeper of the keys has the power to open and to shut, a metaphor in the New Testament to denote power and authority of various kinds. So this angel that had the key of the bottomless pit was power and authority over that region, which is Europe, the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. And we're going to see what he's going to use that chain for. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. This dragon, the old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, is referring to Esau. Now remember, the Edomites were ruling in Europe as the Roman Empire, and then the Lord took them out of power. And then he had Jake, right, Israelites, come up into power, which they call the Dark Ages, and bound him 1,000 years. So for that period of 1,000 years, they were bound by a spiritual, binding to where, similar to when we were brought to the Americas to serve slavery. You might ask, wait, why were there? Yeah, there were rebellions, but why were there not a lot more revolts on these plantations, like almost daily? Because yes, you had the master and he had guns, but it was only really one or two, and the plantation was full of men, strong men. Yeah, he may be able to, if he got a shotgun, he still got to reload. If everybody rushed him, and this happened on multiple plantations simultaneously, we could have really done some damage. But why was the fear of them upon us so heavily? That you a slave, right, that is big and brolic, and you have this short, puny, frail Edomite with just a whip in his hand, and you're petrified of him. And you could just grab his neck and you put him 6 feet under and call it a day. But why? Because the Lord had a seal upon us. He put the fear of Esau upon us. Even though you would think logically, well, why didn't we just overrun it? No, because the Lord put a seal upon us, so we we couldn't. All right. Likewise, that's what he did during this 1,000-year period. So they were subject. They were in a low position. They couldn't come up. You can read about the history of that. What was happening to the Edomites during the Dark Ages? They couldn't come up and the places where they dwelt was disgusting. Okay, it was absolutely disgusting, vile. It says, verse 3, and cast him into the bottomless pit, which is in Europe, and shut him up and set a seal upon him. So they were locked up in a sense of in subjection, like how we were during slavery. So they couldn't rise up or usurp any authority over us during that period of time. And that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. Now, in Revelation 20, it gets pretty tricky when it deals with the 1,000 years and the time periods in here. So it's important to to keep in mind, or as we go through, that it jumps around. All right, the vision that John sees, the time periods of it jump around. So this first 1,000 years was the period of when Esau was bound, right, in Europe during the Dark Ages, under the reign of the Israelites, right, as the Romans, right, the the Holy Roman Empire and so on, which were ruled by Israelites in Europe. The Edomites were subject. They were bound for that 1,000 years. And after that, he must be loosed a little season. So after that 1,000-year period was up, right around the time of the Renaissance period, leading up to that, they were loosed. So the Lord took that spiritual seal from off them, and they were then able to come up and start taking down Jake that was in power and start to take over again, because the Lord set it up that way. So that was them being loosed a little season. Now, I'm going to jump from verse 3 down to verse 7, because verse 4, Verses 4, 5, and 6 are dealing with another time period. Okay, so when you to understand the vision that John is receiving here, after they're loose for a season in verse 3, you have to jump down to verse 7. Verse 7, the vision from verse 7 continues the time from verse 3. Okay, verses 4, 5, and 6 come after. The things seen in verses 4, 5, and 6 come after. Those events come after that of, verses 7 on down. So jumping from verse 3 to verse 7, we'll come back to 4, 5, and 6. It says, and when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. Same thing here in verse 3. It says that till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he should be loosed a little season. And that Satan is the Edomites. So they were loosed out of their prison, which was that seal the Lord put on them, so that they could come back into power. And shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth. So when they came back into power, what they did, having been down for about 1,000 years, all the icons and all the the things that were done and accomplished by the dark-skinned rulers, the Israelite rulers during the time of the Dark Ages, when they came up into power, they destroyed a lot of evidence of that. They deceived the whole world. They started to paint their images and paint over the dark-skinned images. They started to destroy the icons. It's called iconoclasm, right? The destruction of the icons or the images, so that they can deceive the world through a lie, and claim credit for things that they didn't do. And so now, and then that's when they call it the rebirth, because a lot of the nonsense and the lies that are spat out today go back to the time of the Renaissance era. Okay, because prior to that, people knew, when they try to, some of the so-called scientific explanations for the world today, oh, the sun is the thousands of light years away, and the earth is really revolving around the sun, and all of these different things, these deceptions they came out with, it's a part of their deceiving the nations. The Lord is a pale skin looking person. If you look at Renaissance art in itself was also deception. So they try to cover up and hide the truth during that time. And eventually, through that deception, right, as it says here, it jumps to Gog and Magog, which is dealing with Russia, to gather them together to battle. Why? Because when you, once again, going back to the letter that was sent between Albert Pike and Giuseppe Mazzini, it was a plan for 3 world wars. And they were going to pull the strings on different parts and different nations to orchestrate 3 world wars in order to change the world and push forth their new world order. So a part of that deception was to infiltrate the different governments of the different of the different countries in the world, and then orchestrate this through shadow governments behind the scenes. And in leading in those actions that they would take, it would lead to this 3rd World War involving Russia. That's why it mentions them to gather them together to battle, which is the battle of Armageddon, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea, dealing with the size of their army, because Russia is a formidable, opponent. Verse 9, and they went up on the breadth, they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about, which here is dealing with the land of Israel. And when you go into Ezekiel 38, that goes into that as well, right? About Russia being like a storm to cover the land. And the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. And the beloved city is Jerusalem. But in I think it mentioned that. Let's go real quick in Ezekiel 38, because Ezekiel 38 expounds on that, how the Lord is going to use Russia, right, to come against Israel, to partake in this war. And then his anger is going to be stirred up, and then he's going to destroy the Gog after using him to sanctify himself. Right? Verse Ezekiel chapter 38, verse Ezekiel 38 and 18, and it shall come to pass at the same time when Gog shall come against the land of Israel. See that? Saith the Lord God, that my fury shall come up in my face. For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath have I spoken. Surely in that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel. And then when you jump down, it says, and I will call for a sword against him. Who? God. Because now that the Lord has already used them, the Lord is going to bring judgment upon them too. Throughout all my mountains, saith the Lord God, every man's sword shall be against his brother. And I will plead against him with the pestilence and with blood. And the missiles are also likened onto pestilence. But also, when you go into pestilence, you usually think of diseases, right? But let's look into that word pestilence. It says here a plague, right? And a plague is not only talking about like diseases, right? Because when you read in Zechariah, I believe it's 14, it describes the fire, the nuclear fire, as a plague. So where we at? Ezekiel 38 and 22. And it says here, and will rain upon him and upon his bands, his armies, and upon the many people that are with him. That's how you know it's talking about Gog, because it mentions those many people in the first few verses. And overflowing rain and great hailstones, fire and brimstone, which is going to include the lasers from the chariots, going back to Revelation 20, about the fire that came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. Because the Lord is, remember, his determination is to gather the nations that he's going to plead with them to destroy them. So he's going to use nations against each other, and then he's also going to destroy them. It says here, verse 23, thus will I magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I will be known in the eyes of many nations, and they shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh. Okay, so going back to Revelation chapter 20, verse 10. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are. So they're going to be destroyed. Esau, his now this is with the exception of his elites, because they're going to be preserved for captivity. But this is going to be dealing with, you know, a good portion of the Edomite cities and countries, their system, their power that they've set up. That's going to be cast into the lake of fire. So it's going to be destroyed, where the beast, which is once again their power structure, and the false prophet, their religious system, are. So all that is going to be destroyed at this time, because the fire coming down from God out of heaven means that the Lord Yahushua is going to be here, and he's going to destroy their idols. He's going to destroy their religious system. He's going to destroy their power structure. He's going to destroy it all, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever, meaning for a period of time. And then it goes into, right, verse 11, and I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and heaven fled away. The earth and heaven is referring to the the age of Esau. Okay, because at the return of Yahushua and the destruction of Esau's kingdom, that's going to be likened onto the old world fleeing away, because the actual planet is not going to flee away. It tells us that in I think it's Ecclesiastes, I believe it might be the first chapter. Yeah, Ecclesiastes 1 and 4. One generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. So this face of the earth and heaven fleeing away is talking about the reign or the rulership of Esau, and it's going to flee away at the return of Yahushua, because it's going to be destroyed. And real quick, let's go to 2nd Ezra chapter 6, verse 9. For Esau is the end of the world, right? The first heaven and earth, and earth, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. That's why it said that the earth and the heaven fled away, because the beginning of the reign of Jacob, starting with Yahushua, was now coming in. And there was no place found for them. So Esau's rulership was taken out. It was completely done. Verse 12, and I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God. So the sequence of events here, right, and we still haven't gotten to verses 4, 5, and 6 yet, but we will. But the sequence of events here is starting from the time when the Lord took, Esau out of power as the Romans, put them in captivity, subjected them to a low state. Then you had Israelites ruling in Europe during the Dark Ages. Esau comes back into power during the Renaissance, goes about to deceive the world. In process of time, triggers World War III, that's jumping in verse 8 on down. Russia, which plays a big role in World War III, eventually comes against the land of Israel. After the Lord uses them to bring destruction, he then destroys them. Okay, and then that includes at that point, the power structure of Esau, his deceitfulness, his religious system, all of that is destroyed at the same time. And then at the return of Yahushua, which is at that same time as well, because that's why Esau's whole system is going to be destroyed. You see the ushering in now of this new heaven, this new rulership, this new dominion. Okay, and then you have here verse 12, the judging. So it says here, I saw the dead, which is talking about the actual dead. And verse 13 is going to go into that as well. Small and great stand before God, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works. See, so the deeds that you do, you're going to be judged for. Even if you died, when the Lord comes back, you're going to be brought back to life and judged. And if you're worthy of the second death, you're going to be thrown in there. And whatever judgment you're worthy of, you're going to be judged accordingly. And if you are of the elect and you died in the Lord, when you're raised up and your name is in the book of life, you're going to be resurrected, and you're going to be joined up with the Lord in the chariots. Verse 13, and the sea gave up the dead which were in it. So those that had died, that were in the seas, that their bodies were cast into the water, they're going to be brought back. The Lord is going to reconstruct their bodies, because it's really a composition of different elements that form your body in the first place. He's going to reconstruct it, and he's going to bring them out. Okay? It says here, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them. See, so those that had died, right, and those that were buried in the graves, they're going to be brought back to life. And they were judged, every man according to their works. And I believe that's also, maybe if I cross-reference it, I might be able to find it. Yep, there you go. John 5:28. Marvel not at this, for the hour is coming, in the which all that are in the graves shall hear his voice. Whose voice? The voice of Yahushua. And shall come forth, they that have done good, unto the resurrection of life. Revelation 20 is going to mention that. The first resurrection. And they that have done evil, unto the resurrection of damnation. That is to suffer the judgment or the penalty of their evil works. Revelation 20:14. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. Now, what it means by death and hell were cast into the lake of fire, death and hell is as it says, right? Death and the grave. But you can't actually cast death into fire. Okay? That doesn't make sense. You can't actually cast death and hell. What this means is the Lord, and is going to go into it and expound on it in Revelation 21. But after this final judgment, Israel, there will be no more death for Israel, because we're going to be made immortal. For those that are delivered, that are of the elect, they're going to be changed unto immortality. And those that are Israelites that die on this side are going to be born through the loins of the elect, which are immortal. So all Israel shall be saved. Therefore, death is no longer going to reign among us. That's how it was cast into the lake of fire, meaning it's not going to affect us or have power over us anymore. But guess what? It's not the complete destruction of it for the whole world, because the heathens are still going to die. But death and hell also symbolize the workings, okay, the workings of death, right, along with the hellish conditions that we had to go through, here, which is likened onto being in hell. That's all going to be done away with. That's a part of the old world. Once again, Revelation 21 goes into that. It says, this is the second death, and whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Now let's jump up back to verse 4. It says, and I saw thrones, and they that sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahushua. So here, once again, in the last few verses, it dealt with the judgment, right? You had some that were raised up onto destruction, and some that were raised up unto salvation to receive their reward. And you're going to have those that are raised up to sit upon thrones to rule with Yahushua. And you're going to have those, as he says, the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahushua. They're also going to be raised up, and for the word of God, which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Yahushua HaMashiach 1,000 years. And this goes to show you, you're going to have some that are martyred for Yahushua in these last days. And they're going to be ones who have also refused to take the mark and to worship the beast. And the reason it mentions or specifies reigning 1,000 years is not limited to 1,000 years, because we're going to be immortal. But the first 1,000 years are going to be, the highlight, or the crucial years, or the transition period, where all the the idolatrous, wicked, and perverse ways that have been pushed upon the earth through the deception. Remember, right, that the devil was loosed and he went to do that deception. He corrupted life. He corrupted the people. He deceived the world, the nations. So the first 1,000 years is going to be to set righteousness back in order as the standard of living. And these nations are going to learn that through captivity. How did we learn wickedness? Through captivity. Okay. The worst captivity being the one that we suffered here. So it says here, verse 5, but the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. The context of verse 5 is different than the context of verse 6. The resurrection mentioned in verse 5 is a different resurrection than what's mentioned in verse 6. The resurrection, verse 5, when it mentions the rest of the dead live not again, these are referring to the other nations. After the Yahushua comes back and, the Esau system is destroyed, the nations are going to be put in captivity. Okay. So when you go into the word lived here, for a period of 1,000 years, they're going to be in captivity. They're not going to be restored to a normal life until the 1,000 years are finished. That's what it means by they lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. Physically, they're going to be alive, but when it says lived, let's go into that word. It says to live again, to recover life, to be restored to a correct life, right? Of one who returns to a better moral state. So they're not going to be returned to a better moral state or a correct life until that 1,000 years is fulfilled, where they're no longer going to be in hardcore captivity, but also their minds are going to be corrected, and cleansed of the filth and deception that Esau had taught the world. That is the first resurrection, all right, where the nations are allowed, to live a normal life again out of captivity. Verse 6, blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. This first resurrection is talking about the deliverance, the salvation, right? When we cross-referenced, what was it? Let me see. Was it this 12 for John? Yeah, John 5. Let me pull that up on the side, actually. John 5 and 28. And now let's go back up. So in verse 6, this first resurrection is the same one that John is referring to here in John 5 and 29, where it says, and shall come forth they that have done good unto the resurrection of life, because they are the ones who the second death is not going to have power over. So it says here, blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power. This is going to be those that had died in Yahushua that are going to be raised up and delivered. And it's going to be those that are alive at Yahushua's return that are going to be raised up and joined with Yahushua in the heavens, right, in the chariot. The second death is not going to destroy them. But they shall be priests of God and of Hamashiach, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. Okay, so that is the end of Revelation, the 20th chapter. But you see why you have to jump around a bit because the time periods and when these visions are fulfilled, is different. It's not in chronological order like it's written in these verses here. So if you just read it straight through, you might get confused because there's a mention of 1,000 years in verse 3, then there's a mention of 1,000 years in verse 4, and then there's a mention of a resurrection in verse 5 and in verse 6, and then you jump back to another 1,000 years in verse 7. So it's easy to get confused, but if you read it in the right order with the Spirit of the Lord opening up your mind, you'll understand it. And that brings us to the end of the book of Revelation, the 20th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.